You're watching World Championship Wreckage, professional wrestling history the way the fans remember. Brought to you by Rivet City Radio and the World Championship Wreckage YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Today's episode.
Whoa, 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 whoa. It's season 2, baby. We're changing it up. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Wreckage here on World Championship Wreckage. It's been a minute. It's been about a month. You know, we're busy folks. Will's running his stuff over at Rivet City Radio. I'm being dad and working in retail, so we got busy lives. We talk almost daily, but trying to get us together in front of a camera is wild. But before we get into today's topic, it finally happened. Will and I met in person. We exist. Like, it actually happened, which was really cool.
It was, and we were just talking about it. It seems like it was yesterday, and then sometimes it feels like it was like 9 months ago.
Yeah.
It's a very odd feeling. I'm really excited. We were planning a summer trip, and then the news that WrestleMania was going to Las Vegas dropped. So we were like, okay, so Vegas is happening in at least a year. Like, it's going to be it'll be exciting. It was a really fun trip. I was glad we got to do it and knock it out. Got to meet everybody. Got to experience the Rumble. Yeah. It was tip top.
It was a blast. It was a blast. My wife jokingly said before we went down there, because it was everybody. It was Bree and Jax and John and significant others and all that stuff, and me and you, and she was just like, that's a lot of different personalities. That's different. It's different. She's like, it's different talking to each other over, talking about wrestling, but y'all are going to be around each other for 48 hours straight. Are y'all still going to be friends after this? And I was like, I got home and I'm like, oh, we're good. Like, it was, I mean, everybody was literally the exact same as how we are here. Like,
that was probably the nicest part about it, was that there was no like warm-up period to meeting the strangers from the internet that you got warned about, because we all knew each other. Most of us, I mean, me and you and Jax and me and Tommy and you and John and Jax and John and Tommy and John, like a lot of us had already overlapped and had real cell phone numbers and real life conversations outside of the podcasting world. So it was like the world of Tinder, where you spend a month chatting with somebody before you ever actually have the first date. So you feel like you already know the person before you ever actually meet them.
Yeah.
That's the best way to describe what happened. It was like a 3-year-long pen pal relationship before we ever decided to hug for the first time.
Yeah, and it was cool. Even though I'm still going to give Tommy crap. He lived the closest, and he was the last one to get there.
I have no idea how that happened.
I found out. He told me he had gotten ready, and then he fell asleep.
Yeah, he told me that he crashed and he overslept because he was planning to take a nap, and then he was like, because he had to go to Walmart and a few other stops, and he said when he went to sleep, he just set an alarm, and then he just woke up, and it was like after he was already supposed to be gone, not like, oversleeping the alarm. Oh, I've got to rush to get ready to leave. Like, no, this man was like, he should have already been on the way to Jax, and he had just woken up.
Yeah. And also, before we get into today's topic, I just want to say a big congratulations, and also send a virtual hug your way, because you posted the other day, it's been 2 years since you kicked cancer's ass, and that's a good thing. That's a great thing.
It was a that day and the day I'm diagnosed. Those two are the two that were those are the two most important to me. June 17th, when I got diagnosed, and February 11th, 7.5, almost 8 months later, when I finished my chemo regimen. Like, it was the longest almost year of my life. And those 2 days every year when they roll around, like, they're always there.
Yeah. No. Well, I'm glad you're here. You know, it's cool to do this today. This time last year was not a good day for me and my family. So today was a lot better of a February 13th at the time of this recording. But yeah, let's get into today's episode. So y'all voted, y'all wanted this. I mean, yes, I'm the one that threw out this topic, but I knew that because Will and I have talked about this, off camera, we can stay very level headed about this subject. Yes, it's been talking to the ground. And I had people that actually messaged and commented and sent me messages saying, I didn't vote for this topic because it has been talked into the ground. Why do it again? And I'm like, it's still something that happened. It's still something that can be discussed, and I think will be discussed until, till another generation kind of takes over, like completely. Like our generation remembers this. I can't say fondly, but remembers this well because it was a big incident, and they're kind of linked together. So today we are going to be talking about the deaths of Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. It's a sensitive subject matter, and it's I will first thing I'm going to say is, look, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a nephew. I do not condone what Chris Benoit did in that household. But I also can separate in-ring character Chris Benoit versus real life person Chris Benoit. And I think that's kind of what boils down to, and that's how we've kind of always talked about it between me and you. But I wanted to do them together because I think that I don't know if you can really talk about the Benoit situation and death without talking about Eddie first.
I was muted. No, I've said it best, and I've talked about this a few times on Botch Spots After Dark. I think the best way to look at it is that night, 3 people lost their lives. One of them had a choice.
Yeah.
As a fan and as a father and all the things you said, like you said, you can't condone what happened. But as an analyst, and even as an amateur analyst, you look at the reality of things like CTE and the things we've found out about football players and wrestlers that have had work done after the fact, after they've retired, to show kind of the irreparable damage that's done by this profession and other professions. I think that, yes, it was an open and closed case, but I think there was more to it than just Chris lost his mind and did the terrible things that he did. I don't think there was ever a good case brought up to go, why did this happen? It was just, it happened, end of story. And that was it. And I think that's the one thing I'm going to say the biggest is, like, there should have been more into it than just stopping. Yeah. This happened, it's done.
And that's kind of how it feels. Like, that's a great way of putting it. It really does feel like, we found out what happened. WWE did a memorial. More information came out. And then that was it. And then, we got maybe a little bit time went by and we got, more information, like, Chris Nowinski and all the stuff about CTE came out and everything. But it's like we hit a brick wall, like we hit a stop sign, and that was it. And it was, here's what happened. We're done. That's it. There's no more information. But I think you got it. Like I said, I think you have to start with Eddie, which, I mean, you go back in their careers, in ring, friendship, they're tied together forever. and it sucks that they both were. That they like I didn't realize that it like I did not remember the age Eddie was when he passed away, and I just looked it up before we got on camera, and I was like 38. Holy crap! I turned 39 this year.
Yeah, we're the same age as Eddie.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me because you think about, I don't want to say something cheesy. And when people say like they're wrestling soulmates, like to me, yes, part of me, the analytical mind goes, it's a predetermined sport. They're just really good at what they do.
Yeah.
But the deeper I get into the wrestling business itself, the more I realize that like wrestling soulmates exist. Guys just get it. And not that just get it, but get it with somebody else. That chemistry in the ring is so important. And when it boils down to it, like Eddie and Chris, Eddie and Ray, Chris and Dean, Eddie and Dean, and you see this class of wrestlers. And when we had Crowbar here on WCW, he talked about it like it didn't matter how good you were in that cruiserweight division because you had a Rey Mysterio and an Eddie Guerrero and a Dean Malenko and a Chris Benoit all just right there in front of you. So you could be a Crowbar, an A-plus cruiserweight in the mid-90s, and you still had 4 of the best light heavyweights to ever do it standing in front of you. And Benoit and Guerrero were always back and forth in their entire careers.
Yeah. You know, everybody always talks about that to me it's a cheesy line of, oh, in one generation we had Austin and Rock and Hunter and Taker and Foley all in the same generation. It's a once of a lifetime perfect storm. It's never going to happen. You can say that, and you can add, you had Guerrero, you had Benoit, you had Malenko, you had Ray, and there's a handful more you can add to that list. Again, same generation, perfect storm. Never going to happen again that way, I don't think.
But sometimes, and this is me being the double-edged sword, like playing devil's advocate. That's the analogy I'm looking for. But you could be WCW in 1992 or 1989, rather 1991, that the early 90s range, and you have Foley and you have Undertaker and you have Austin.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? Like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I feel like in wrestling, I've heard this said a bunch. It's right place, right time, right eyes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you could be the right person in the right place with the right talent. But if the right person doesn't see you work, what difference does it make? It's a lot like music. You could play 1,000 live shows. It only takes one where the executive producer for Capitol Records hears you and changes your career.
It's a great analogy. That's a fantastic analogy. Yeah. That is totally right. I mean, hey, Undertaker was told he'd never draw a dime. No one ever would pay him to, no one would ever pay to see him wrestle. And one of the most legendary careers in our time. But if you go back and you look at, I mean, wrestling soulmates is a great way to put it. I mean, you look back to even when Eddie was still under a mask and Benoit was younger, which is, you look back at when, like, he doesn't even necessarily look like Benoit. And you watch and you're like, stuff that I know that comes later, you're seeing that then early, but it's a little rougher. It's a little more down and dirty, and it hadn't been polished. But then by the time they get to where, they're hitting that mainstream, it's clean, it's crisp, it's smooth. It's the beauty that we see when they're in the ring together. And I think as fans, like, we maybe didn't know, because in the time frame, internet, it was in its infancy. For us as fans in our teenage years when they were in WCW, like, we were necessarily, we're not picking apart the business yet a lot. We might hear one or two things. Like, the first internet thing I ever remember seeing about possibly something being spoiled was, hey, Chris Jericho is going to sign with WWF. and he's going to show up. That was the first internet thing I ever saw.
That was 2001, 2000.
2099 or 2000, yeah.
Yeah.
So like that. So I was 14, 15. That was like the first internet thing I ever seen. It was just like, hey, this might happen. That might be what that countdown clock is. But we saw them together in WCW. We saw them grow together in WCW. If you knew them in ECW, you saw them. I saw more of their ECW stuff later on in life, but then they do the jump to WWF as the Radicals with Saturn and Malenko, and you see their careers grow together there. And so it's like, as a fan though, like, you're seeing that growth there, but you didn't necessarily really know the behind the scenes everything, like, and how close they actually were. So like, I mean, I look back at like the WrestleMania 20, and I mean, that was 20 years ago this year, because we're going into 40. And you had Eddie, who successfully defended his first WWF championship. The storyline of Benoit finally being able to capture the big one, finally. And then confetti pouring down over both of them. And it's stories that they share together, and it's wiped from history for the most part, which I don't necessarily know if I agree with it, but I get why they're doing it.
You have to understand why they're doing it. Again, like, nobody condones what happens. And I've said this, and this is an unpopular opinion, and I've got some flack for it even. But the reality of the situation is that in a world of Netflix, where Jeffrey Dahmer is glorified to a point that people are putting this man on a pedestal, talking about how cute he was. And this is in 2023, mind you, or 2022 when his documentary hit, the one that had Evan Peters in it.
Mm-hmm.
If people are ready, which, by the way, Evan Peters killed that role.
Yeah, he did.
Perfectly acted.
Yeah, he did.
But neither here nor there. The fact is, if people can put people like Jeffrey Dahmer and John Wayne Gacy on a pedestal, how come the sport that somebody like Benoit helped revolutionize can't say his fucking name?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to cuss, but you know how passionate I am about that. Like, it doesn't, because you support Benoit's art does not mean you accept the thing, like the incredibly volatile things that he did that night. And at this point, damn near 20 years later, like, it's time people start peeling this onion back a little bit.
Yeah.
It's, and it's just the reality of it. And I'm sorry, but I'm, like you said, we'll be the two that keep a cool head about it. And that's probably the most worked up I'll get all night.
For me, I think it's the argument that I put into it is it's pro wrestling. Like, you look at any other sport. I'm going to use the NFL as probably as the big example. How many NFL players?
OJ, Ray Lewis.
Yeah. Like SA. 11-1. Kill somebody.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh man, he's a hell of a player. Like, look at their stats, and they again, and that's fine. But because it's pro wrestling, it's that. But I agree with you. It's 20 years later.
It's
like, you should be. I mean, I'm not saying I should be. No one should be out here and being like woo, Benoit, like, and just seriously like glorifying that. But like, you can still be a fan of his work. I did a TikTok not too long ago, and I said, if that never happened, the amount of dream matches people would be booking today with him would be insane.
This is going to be a really extreme analogy, but I think you'll get the point that I'm making here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They still talk about the fact that in 1945, the United States took the sun to Japan and annihilated and wiped 2 entire cities off the planet.
Sure.
Again, I'm not taking away from what this man did. They're terrible. OJ, acquitted of 2 murders. Not found guilty, but not found innocent either. Ray Lewis, acquitted of both murders. Not found guilty, but not found innocent either. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many instances throughout every other sport. We saw it with Jimmy Snuka forever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In pro wrestling, it's like, it's time. It's just time.
I'm going to ask you a bold question. And we'll never know. This is hypothetical. I want your opinion on this, though. Eddie doesn't pass away. Do we still get this tragedy?
No.
Cool.
I think that Eddie and Chris would have been on the road together that weekend.
Even with everything we know about, like, you know, later, you know, scientific knowledge about. I know Chris Nowinski said at one point, like, they did the autopsy on Benoit's brain, and it looked like it was like an 80-year-old dementia patient.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's why it shouldn't have been an open and closed case, because yes, Chris did that, but it wasn't Chris who did that. If the light switch and the damage that was done finally hit and that light switch happened and he didn't know who he was or what he was doing, and then he came back in from a fit, or he, you know, became cognizant again of what was happening around him, if that had just happened for the first time, there could have been people there to help, or there could have been people there to help control him or to get it under control. Nancy and Daniel weren't going to be big enough, strong enough, or fast enough to control him if that light switch happened. I just think there needed to be more research done. It was a tragedy, not just because an innocent kid and an innocent woman lost their lives, but because one of the greatest wrestlers to ever do it, we never got the why did it happen. And I think that's what gets me the most.
Yeah. I think my ultimate standpoint, and like, if someone was like, where are you, like, if anyone ever just blatantly was like, hey, where do you stand on the Benoit, like on Benoit in the world of pro wrestling? I think I fall in line with like the interview, or this, like, it was Paul Heyman on a stage show, and someone is yelling out, "My boy," when Benoit gets mentioned, and he's like, "Why are you saying my boy?" And he literally says, he's like, "Look, in ring, one of the best of all time. That can never be disputed. But just like you said at the beginning, 3 people lost their lives in that house. 1 had a choice." And that's what
absolutely right. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where I stand. Like, in ring, one of the best of all time. One of the best of all time. But 2 people didn't have a choice in that. 1 did. Let's move to Eddie for a second. Eddie is still celebrated to this day. He's represented in merchandise. He's represented in video games. He's represented, you hear in interviews, even still to this day, with like Mercedes Moné. That's their inspiration. And I'm not saying he shouldn't be. It's like I know that Benoit will never be honored. Clearly, like, I know that there's no Hall of Fame ever for him. Eddie got his Hall of Fame, but it's one of those things where, too, it I don't know, it's so closely tied together that it's just like, at times when stuff gets brought up about Eddie, I'm like, I'm not mad, but I'm like, if my son watches Eddie Guerrero and asks what happens and sees a match with Benoit, I then have to explain it to him. And I think that maybe needs to be a little bit more. It can't be addressed like in storyline, obviously, but like, if you're doing, I don't know, documentaries, or you're doing something, it just can't stop with his death. Like, because his death caused something. It affected something to an extreme level with Chris. So I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going with this. But like, I don't know. It almost, to me, is like celebrating Ray Eddie as much as they do, at times it's almost like, hey, that's also our way of rubbing Benoit in people's faces, if that makes sense.
I would say in a lot of ways, them leaning heavy into Ray is almost like giving Benoit his roses in a lot of ways. Because you can't have Eddie without having Chris. If you go back to the Luchador invasion in the early 90s when Ray came over with Conan, like Benoit was right there. He had just came down from Canada. And then you look at their careers grow from ECW into WCW. They both use those mid-card, the TV titles, the US heavyweight title. We've talked about both of them to become the main eventers. So that way, when they got the WWE as the Radicals, a mid-card faction in the invasion angle, they were able to take control. And within 4.5, 5 years of being in the biggest wrestling company in the world, two of the smallest statured men were standing on top of the mountain. And I think without one, you don't get the other. So yeah, they lean super heavy into Eddie. But I think because of that, in the same time, it's almost like they're paying homage to him in some way because of the fact that without one, you didn't have the other.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, I mean, whether you love or you hate Dark Side of the Ring, that 2-part special, probably the best thing they've done in their entire show's run, is that Eddie Benoit. I mean, they go really in depth in it, talking to different people. I mean, the first time I watched it, I cried listening to Chavo talk about finding his uncle. And, we've done an episode. One of our earliest episodes was, Chavo and Eddie from kind of breaking Chavo in and now seeing where Chavo is. And I'm sure Eddie would be super proud that, he was part of one of the biggest wrestling movies ever that, could win major awards, and that's got a Guerrero attached to it. Like,
A24 is talking to Chavo about doing an Eddie movie, for crying out loud. That's how well received
wow, I didn't know that
was. Yeah, that's a highly backed up rumor right now. And I would love to see a Pedro Pascal play Eddie Guerrero. Like, come on, just take my money. I will donate to the Kickstarter to get that film made.
Yeah.
You can have my 50 cents or 75 cents, whatever I have in my pocket.
And that's kind of the thing I'm talking about too. Like, that movie gets made, Benoit's going to have to be represented.
You can't do it without him.
You can't go over that career and not have, like, they might have been best of friends, but to me, if I'm saying who are Eddie Guerrero's greatest rivals, it's Benoit and it's Ray. Like, they're friends and they're foes. They're friends, and add Chavo in there too. They're close. They're enemies. They're close. They're enemies. Like,
do you think, with it not being a wrestling venture, that it would be easier for them to include Benoit? Think about all the crazy things A24's made movies about.
Yeah,
they've made way more heinous things than a unaliving, self-unaliving. Is that the PC way to put it in 2024? I don't want to just say the S&D, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, as soon as Iron Claw came out and it was so well received, I was not on this bandwagon. Like, there were so many people I've seen on social media, whether they put out content or not, or they're just tweeting, or they are putting out kind of calling for, hey, make a Benoit movie. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if you do an Eddie Guerrero movie about his life, Chris Benoit has to be a part of it.
You almost have to make it that way.
Yeah. Like, there's no other way. And people might argue that, say, no, you don't. Too big of a part of his life. And his death was too big of it caused too big of a tsunami wave in another whole, 3 other people's lives.
Ray got one of the biggest pushes in his career because of it.
Yeah. His whole world title run was, I'm dedicating this to Eddie. I'm dedicating this to Eddie.
What was it? Winning from the number 2 spot in the Rumble that year, going up to winning the big gold belt. Like, everything about that run was for Eddie.
Coming out in a lowrider, everything. And they're still doing it. Look at Mania last year. He came out in a lowrider to Eddie's music. Which I mean, I know when I heard that music, I was like, it's like a time machine just transported me back. I was just like, man, I never thought I'd hear that line. And now the LWO is using like the Viva La Raza, the first part, and I'm like, it's just like I never thought I'd ever hear that coming through my television or like through a speaker again. Like it was cool to hear it at the Rumble live, like when Escobar would come through to the Rumble. I was like, damn, I never thought I'd hear that in person, but I never got a chance to before. We're not going to draw out this episode too long because, like we said, it has been beaten into the mud. But I still thought it was a topic that Will and I could address. Will and I know that like we will stay level headed with everything. There's not a lot that really. I mean, I know there is some stuff in the wrestling world that will piss us off. It's more the IWC and stupid stuff that they do. But yeah, I'll say if you want more information about this, watch The Dark Side of the Ring. It's probably, I mean, it's a great documentary, like those 2 episodes about that. Hard to watch. I'm not gonna lie, it's hard to watch, but it's a hard subject to talk about. But go ahead, Will.
I was gonna say shameless plug. I've done a ton of research into it as well. Botch Bots and Share Shots After Dark. Episode 1 is the straight nitty gritty, what happened that night, and kind of running down some of Chris's career. Part 2 of that is very much the tinfoil hat conspiracy theory side of things. We dive into the BACs of the autopsies, the CTE side of it. And I'm not taking, I love Evan Husney. What they do with Dark Side of the Ring is phenomenal. I agree with you. 2 of their best episodes they've ever produced. But one of my pet projects is the After Dark series, and Benoit was a huge part of it. And I took my time. I did my due diligence. I talked to the man's son. Like there was a lot that went into those episodes with my co-host Mike.
They're damn good. They're so good.
Yeah. So that's it. I felt like plugging myself because for people that are interested in the story, there is a lot to the story.
Sorry, my wife is texting me. I'm making sure it's not okay.
Make sure it's not a hey, he's up.
Yeah, well, no, it's she's texting me about Legos. So quick story. If you have someone like my wife who we like weird different things, Legos make flowers now. Not even playing.
That's cool.
Lego flowers. You can buy ones that look like potted plants. You can buy ones that look like that. And like, there's videos on. She sent me a TikTok earlier, like men in line at the Lego stores across the country, like in line with these like Lego things, because that's what they're going to get their wives or girlfriends for Valentine's Day. And not gonna lie, that's what I got her for Valentine's Day too. It's a smaller one, but she was sending me some other ones. She's like, these are cool too. So weird little segue, but yeah, definitely watch the After Dark. Like Will is right. Will put in so much work, and I was sitting there being like, well, I didn't know that. I hadn't heard that before. Like it was really good to watch those. Before we get into a poll for our next episode, hopefully it won't be a month before we record again. We'll do try to get on, if not every week, every 2 weeks, kind of back on a routine. But life, folks, life is real. I got 2 boys and a full-time job and a wife. Will's got everything with Botch and Chair Shots, Rivet City Radio, and literally doing everything. So, first off, Will, what's going on over at Rivet City Radio?
Oh, it's been kind of a quiet year as we get started. The up at the forefront the most, actually, this coming Sunday as we record this, we have our boy DadHat is on the books because we're supposed to be doing the cruiserweight title.
Oh shit, I forgot about that.
I did too until I realized it was this weekend. So we've got that's coming. That's fun. Jackson and I will be doing the the Nerdy News movie review this week is Underdogs, the Snoop Dogg movie where he becomes the Pee Wee football coach. So that'll be tons of fun. Al is starting trivia back up Thursday. Scals and those guys on Off the Top have stuff. We run 7 nights a week. I'm thankful that I don't have to stream 7 nights a week anymore. I'm glad the ship is going on its own now.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got Tommy's got a show, right?
Oh yeah, the after party on Fridays. They run they start at 10:15 and run till midnight Eastern. So 11 to 15 to midnight 12:30 Eastern.
Timmy. Gotta shout out Timmy. Well, for us over here at World Championship Wreckage, it's been a lot of Queen's Court, and I will give them their flowers. They have definitely bust their asses to get a show out every week. I'm like, y'all, slow down. You don't have to. I mean, I appreciate it. I love getting the content out. For a while, it was. You go down the list, it's nothing but just Queen's Court. That's the only show that we were getting out, but it was during the middle of the holidays. So, but we've got stuff. I literally just uploaded and have scheduled, I don't know, 2 or 3 new episodes of creative character writing from our buddy Jay Knows Wrestling, the best producer in all of the IWC. We've got, of course, new episodes coming from us. There's Queen Court, like always. But, y'all, we are literally, at the time of this recording, 6 subscribers away from hitting 200. Which, to me, I mean, when we hit 100, that was a big deal to me. Like, the fact that there's people that are actually following us and watching us and, care enough to do that. It means the world. And I know, like, to us, like, I don't know. Would I like to make some money off of this? Sure, but this is fun. This is the stress relief. This is literally like, this is my downtime. That's where I get to talk wrestling with my friends. Even though we may be hundreds of miles away from each other and only get to see each other like once every who knows when.
At least once a year moving forward. At least once a year.
I try to. Yeah, absolutely. This is just fun, but we appreciate it. But with hitting 200 subscribers, we will be doing another giveaway. I got to decide what I'm giving away. I got a couple different options about what I'm going to be giving away from my collection. And I know Jay said he's got maybe a couple of things to throw in there as well. So it might be, a couple winners for that. But we got 2 new shows going live soon. Two very exciting shows that I'm like, I don't know, like, I'm trying to decide if I want to announce them now or not. I won't announce one yet because I'm waiting for a special delivery to announce the other one. But I can announce one starting probably mid-March because one of our hosts is involved in the theater world like me and is doing a show. But coming soon is going to be called Peak Pro Wrestling. I dropped a little image on TikTok about a week and a half ago about that. And it's going to be hosted by a buddy of mine that literally has been supporting me almost since day one. He took some time away from social media, but Cap Brownbeard, if you know Cap, he used to stream on his own. I think he does still occasionally and everything. Always was super supportive of anything like that we did with the Wolfpack, was super supportive with me. And I think he's got some really good insight and some really good opinions. And I always wanted to work with him. I wanted to get him on our episode of Wreckage, and our schedule just never worked out. But we talked, and he's going to be hosting that alongside. There might be, I know, one other host for sure. There might be 1 or 2 more joining them, but I know for sure she and I connected in the world of theater, but also pro wrestling. Hannah Mania is going to be the co-host with Cap, and with Peak Pro Wrestling, it's going to be kind of like a lot of different podcasts where we talk about what's going on, what happened in the week of wrestling, because we don't have anything here on World Championship Wreckage that talks about the current product. like what's going on. And the reason that it's called Peak Pro Wrestling is they're going to decide at the end of the week, you know, what was the peak moment of the week, what was at the bottom of the mountain. So Peak Pro Wrestling coming soon. Hopefully start of March. Something different.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I will say that I made their intro video, and it's probably the most proudest thing I've ever like edited and pieced together. Like I've watched that thing like every other day.
I like watching, and I saw it with you, and I've seen it especially with the way I have been over the last few years, and even Al, who did it before she got onto podcasting, but like everybody's growth with graphics and video editing and stuff is like everybody gets better, and it's like every new video that drops, we get better and better and better, and I'm like, that's cool.
yeah. I watched that one, and like I sent it to Cap, and he was just like, "That's dope," and I'm like, "It's probably the best thing I've ever put together." Of like of anything that I've put together, I'm like, I am no Jay knows wrestling, but this is pretty dope. I'm gonna claim that one. But as always, you can find World Championship Wreckage on all social medias, Instagram, X, you know, TikTok, all that good stuff. We're actually getting a decent TikTok following, like growth. Like every time, all of a sudden, I forget that I can toggle in between mine and that one, and like. I just constantly have that little red dot. I don't check it for days. I check it. It's like, you have 9+ notifications. And I get log on. It's like, you have 40 new followers. And I'm like, where the hell did they come from? Like, it's just, but I appreciate everybody's support. But here's what we do on Wreckage. It's up to you guys to vote on what we talk about next. So we always throw out a poll. So as soon as this hits the YouTube channel, I'll make that poll live. So, Will, if you want me to go first this time, I know what my topic is. I can throw it out.
Go ahead.
Okay. I almost did this last time. It's a big debate. It's a big debate about who is the greatest tag team of all time. And you know I love me some tag team wrestling. Some say it's the Road Warriors. I unfortunately do not agree with that. I want to talk about the most decorated tag team of all time. I want to talk to some Dudley boys.
I'm glad that you went that direction with it, because when you said I don't think it's LOD, I was like, oh, where's he going to go with this? Because the Dudleys happen to be my second place behind, you know.
Yeah, I want to talk Dudley boys from what they did in ECW, transitioning over into mainstream, going into TNA, separating Bubba Ray turning into Bully Ray, winning a world title, where they are now, where they are. It would be a good discussion because I mean, it's
that's a lot of character work.
It's a story arc. I mean, they have and now they're teasing maybe one more run.
Sorry, Braun Breaker and Baron Corbin just won the NXT tag titles.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Well, all right.
That's why I was kind of like, wait a second, that really just happened? Like they just won the Dusty Cup.
Yeah.
It's funny that you bring up the Dudley Boys, because when we were talking about it, my initial reaction was, this is my favorite WrestleMania. And I feel like there's two reasons why. And it's the main event and then the semi-main event before it. Or not the semi-main, it's 3 matches before it. And that's WrestleMania 17, WrestleMania X7, TLC 2, Austin and Rock. Those two specific stories. The rest of the pay-per-view is amazing. Go watch it. Have fun. I want to specifically talk about the TLC 2 match between Edge and Christian, Hardys and Dudleys, and the build from Austin winning the Rumble in 01 through WrestleMania 17 against Corporate Rock, and then the heel turn that happens at the end.
Okay. All right. Hey, either way, we get to talk some Dudleys, so I don't hate it. So, I love me some Dudleys. Dudley. I had a Dudley Boys when they came back to WWE, and they had the one that had the shirts that had the big 3D on it, and it said "Get the tables." I had that shirt. I love that shirt. I wore it into the ground. I no longer have that shirt. I'm pissed. Like every once in a while, I'm like, man, I want to wear that shirt. I don't have it anymore. But yeah. so yeah, next time we'll be talking either Dudley's or WrestleMania 17. It's kind of nice to have the freedom of not just, we will do more WCW, but we get to do, now that we're going to kind of branch out and cover everything, just cover everything. We just we're staying in our comfort zone of what we were watching growing up, which is the fun stuff to talk about. So, well, for my buddy, for my my Beyonce to my Kelly Rowland, yes, I just called you by Beyonce. He is the Will Gray. I'm your friendly neighborhood dad hat wearing, I was about to say wrestle talker, but wrestling fan, I guess, should be the best way to say it. And I'm gonna quit mumbling, and we're gonna go out like we go out every episode, folks. Wise words from Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, baby, I got one more thing to say. Your gas tank is full. Your dipstick is in. Your windows washed. Y'all come back and see me again.